The rain commenced its descent early that evening, beginning as a light, hesitant drizzle before evolving into a steady, rhythmic tapping against the glass panes of the suburban house. Emily Carter moved through the familiar rooms with a restless, subterranean energy she found impossible to define, the specific kind of unease that surfaces when something in the atmosphere feels fundamentally off, yet remains nameless. As she mechanically wiped the kitchen counters and glanced at the ticking clock, her mind drifted toward Jake Miller, her stepson. He had departed hours earlier, his face a canvas of nervous excitement for his first serious date. It was his first real foray into a world he believed would fundamentally change him, and Emily vividly recalled how he had paused at the threshold, adjusting his jacket and attempting a confident posture while his eyes betrayed a volatile mixture of hope and terror. She had wished him luck with a gentle, supportive smile, yet she couldn't explain why her chest had tightened the moment the door clicked shut behind him. The house felt cavernously quiet after his departure, the sort of silence that amplifies the smallest sounds, the low hum of the refrigerator, the persistent tick of the clock, and the rain growing increasingly heavy as the night settled in. Emily found herself ruminating on the past, thinking about how first moments are so often polished in the imagination, even though reality rarely adheres to such perfect plans. She wondered if Jake truly grasped that yet, or if this night was destined to teach him that lesson in a much harsher way. The hours slipped by faster than she anticipated, and when the flash of headlights finally cut through the grey rain outside, her heart skipped a beat for no discernible reason. The front door didn't open with the expected burst of laughter or youthful excitement. Instead, it swung wide with a slow, heavy sound. Jake stepped inside looking diminished. His clothes soaked through and his shoulders slumped under an invisible weight. The vibrant joy he had carried out of the house was utterly extinguished, replaced by a hollow, distant gaze. Emily knew instinctively that something fragile and new had broken inside him. Though she reminded herself to grant him the space a young man needs, her maternal instincts pulled her toward him. She watched him kick off his shoes in silence, avoiding her gaze like someone desperate to remain invisible. When she finally called his name, her voice wasn't one of authority, but of profound care. He froze, turning around with a forced, brittle smile that failed to fool anyone. In that brief look, Emily saw a crushing disappointment and a quiet, misplaced shame. She asked if he was okay, keeping her tone safe and grounded, and though he nodded too quickly with a lie, she didn't push. She simply stepped aside and let him breathe. In that small act of restraint, the space between them transformed. It wasn't about crossing a line, it was about opening a door. Jake eventually began to speak, his words rushing out in uneven fragments. He explained how the night had collided with reality and lost, how he felt foolish for believing it would be magical just because he desired it to be. Emily listened with a focused intensity, understanding that he didn't need a lecture, he needed to be heard. The rain outside grew more torrential, matching the tempo of his unfolding emotions. She felt the heavy weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, knowing her response would shape the marks this first heartbreak would leave on him. She chose her words with meticulous care, offering no grand dramatic comforts, only the simple, grounded truth. She told him that growing up often begins in the ashes of disappointment, and that feeling hurt didn't equate to weakness. As she spoke, she watched his breathing slow and his posture ease. The sharp edge of his pain began to soften as he realized he wasn't navigating this darkness alone. Emily was acutely aware of the delicate balance she had to maintain, as a stepmother and a guide, not a replacement. She kept the boundaries clear, grounding the moment in presence rather than intrusive intimacy. The clock ticked past midnight before Jake finally offered a quiet thank you and retreated to his room. Emily remained in the kitchen, surrounded by the echoes of a turning point that couldn't be undone. She understood that tonight wasn't just about Jake's date, it was about the collision of innocence and reality. As the rain finally began to decelerate, she hoped with everything she had that this pain would eventually lead him towards strength rather than regret. The following morning brought no immediate peace. Emily woke before her alarm, her mind replaying the emotional weight of the previous night. In the kitchen, she found Jake staring at a grey sky through the window, holding a mug of untouched coffee. They shared a silence that was heavy but honest. Pain, she realized, doesn't vanish after one torque. It stretches and reshapes itself. When Jake finally spoke, his voice was tired but steady. He admitted to feeling like a failure, believing that if his first experience had faltered, then perhaps he was fundamentally flawed. Emily responded with a direct honesty, telling him that a person's worth isn't determined in a single night. Adulthood, she explained, is earned through the way we handle the moments when we fall. She shared fragments of her own truths, admitting that she, too, once believed first moments were definitive reflections of the soul, only to find they were often the least accurate. Jake absorbed this slowly, asking questions about fear and how one moves forward when confidence has cracked. Emily didn't pretend to have all the answers, suggesting that moving forward begins with accepting discomfort rather than fleeing from it. As the morning progressed, the conversation flowed with a steady, boundary-respecting honesty. She reminded him that while leaning on family is vital, growth also requires the space of independent reflection and friendship. Jake seemed to realize, perhaps for the first time, that his healing was a process he had to actively participate in. In the days that followed, small but meaningful changes emerged. Jake began re-engaging with his world, choosing movement over the stagnant silence of his room. Emily observed this progress without hovering, proud of his resilience but remaining a cautious guide. One afternoon, Jake thanked her again, stating that her words had helped him feel less broken. Emily accepted his gratitude but gently redirected the credit, reminding him that he was the one doing the heavy lifting of self-growth. This exchange solidified a mutual respect between them, a clarity that stayed firmly on the right side of the line. She wrestled privately with her own sense of responsibility, knowing how easily care can be misconstrued if not handled with absolute maturity. She stayed alert, ensuring their bond remained one of healthy support rather than emotional dependency. As the week drew to a close, the house felt balanced once more. The storm had passed without leaving destruction in its wake. Emily realized that the most powerful form of involvement is often knowing exactly when to step back. As she watched Jake eventually leave the house with his friends, his stride more focused and his eyes steadier, she felt a calm certainty. This chapter of disappointment had shaped him into someone more grounded and aware. Lessons learned through such raw honesty tend to stick, and this one had already begun to forge a stronger man out of the boy who had walked through the rain.